Being a social entrepreneur isn't a hall pass to be a crappy entrepreneur.
Don't think of an investor as someone who wouldn't be interested in your social impact.
We collectively create a social dividend.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Mars Discovery District and welcome to Entrepreneurship 101. My name is Gina Leslie. I manage the Entrepreneurship and Innovation series here, and you are joining us for our first Meet the Entrepreneurs panel discussion within the Entrepreneurship 101 course, where we're focusing on social innovation. A warm welcome to our satellite center participants who are joining us from all over, and our webcast participants as well. It's always very good to have you. If you're interested in resources related to every lecture, and specifically to even this lecture, they will be available by Monday morning, Monday afternoon, so you can check the Mars website. Go to the Entrepreneurs Library, the Mars Library Entrepreneurs Toolkit, and all the resources will be there. So the Meet the Entrepreneurs mini-series within the Entrepreneurship 101 course allows you to hear from entrepreneurs who are not quite early stage, but far enough along that they have a lot of wisdom and a lot of insight to share. And we have a great panel this evening. I've met with a few of them before and interviewed them, so to speak. So I know a bit of their story, and I think they have just amazing stories. So I'm looking forward to hearing them, to hearing what they have to say this evening, and to you receiving from what they have to say as well, and from the wisdom they have to share. At the end, we will have a few hot and cold beverages. So if you're interested in hanging around and meeting someone, meeting a few people, who knows, you may meet your next co-founder for your startup here, I would encourage you. The beverages are free, and we will make some time for you to do some networking. That's one of the objectives of the Meet the Entrepreneur series, is for you to network and to meet people and to take time to get to know the people you're sitting beside more often than not. The next lecture in the series is on IP management, intellectual property management, and we'll have Gilbert's LLP. They've come for many, many years now, and they always have great stuff to share. They always update the information so that we keep abreast of what's going on in the IP space. And in this particular lecture, they will show us how to identify and manage our intellectual property in a strategic way and examine how it fits in with our overall business model. They're really great. It's a panel team of 3 that comes from Gilbert's every year. Last week, if you weren't here last week, we launched the Upstart competition, which is the culminating event for Entrepreneurship 101. I mentioned that the workshops related to the Upstart competition will help you in preparation for the competition in May of next year. And the deadline actually for registering for the workshops is next week this time, so November 20th. So I'd recommend, if you haven't had a chance to go to the Upstart webpage to check out the information to see if you're interested, to do so sooner than later and to sign up for the workshops. I can promise you, you'll come out a lot stronger. Your application will come out a lot stronger having done the workshops. And it's only $100 for the entire workshop series. So that includes perfecting your pitch, starting lean, the value proposition, both 1 and 2, and the business model as well. So $100 covers all 4. And it's very hands-on, very small group, about 20 to 30 people in the room, with and one facilitator who in some respects serves as a mentor, so they can give you a lot of feedback immediately on your business idea, on your pitch. And we're starting with the pitch this year because we realized that there are lots of people who wanted that information earlier than later. So again, take a look at the website, sign up for the workshop, and participate in the Upstart competition. It's a great experience, no matter whether or not you win. A quick plug for our Global Leadership Series with Stephen Huddart, which is on September 24th. That's going to be focused on philanthropy and systemic change. Stephen Huddart is the CEO and president of the J.W. McConnell Family Foundation that has been involved in the field of social innovation for more than 10 years, including as a funder, investor, and founding partner. in Social Innovation Generation, which is an organization that's actually housed here at Mars. In the talk, Stephen will will speak to some of the successes and failures that the McConnell Foundation has faced to date and what they've learned from that, and also explore the potential of social innovation to contribute to an evolutionary shift in society's capacity to adapt in the face of complex changes. The Global Leadership Series is one of our thought leadership series, so we always bring in fairly well-known speakers who are ahead of the game in terms of what's going on in the space. Very, very great turnout, usually about 350 people in the room. So we're very excited about the potential for that and what you can learn from it, even as early-stage entrepreneurs. All right, moving on to more exciting things. For the Meet the Entrepreneurs, if you're here every week, you know that we do a quick icebreaker. This week, what I'd like you to do is take a look at the categories that are there on the screen, and introduce yourself to the person who is next to you and say whether or not you fall into one of those categories. If you don't, that is perfectly fine. So take a minute and introduce yourselves. You have 1 minute, and then I'll introduce our moderator for this evening and get started. So our panel this evening consists of Jared Walker, Emily Branton, Ryan Porter, and Kevin Lee. Jared Walker is our moderator for this evening, and he is the managing editor of SocialFinance.ca, and he's also the communications associate for the Mars Center for Impact Investing that just finished a very successful, in my mind, social finance forum last week. So that was really great. Congrats to their team on that. Prior to Mars, Jared worked for national and regional nonprofits and political campaigns in the US and in Canada, including serving as New York State Coordinator of Students for Obama during the 2008 presidential election. As a speaker, Jared has engaged audiences on issues of politics, youth mobilization, community building, and engaging men to end violence against women. Jared's passion is cultivating accountable, representative, forward-thinking communities, and he believes social finance is rebuilding capitalism with a soul and is a key part of that vision. Jared is going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome them to the stage.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us on this frosty night, and also just we were talking before, and kudos to everybody for actually completing the icebreaker. I saw no selfies happening, like no tweeting. It was very impressive. So rather than have folks read their bio, like the bio that I wrote and submitted to Gina, which she kindly read to you, I'm just going to ask everyone, kind of, who are you? How'd you get here? And what does your venture do? And what market are you disrupting? Or what's the challenge that you are facing with your venture?
I'll kick it off. My name is Emily Branton. I am the president of a company called Link to Feed, and that's Link, the number 2, and Feed. We are a social purpose business and certified B Corp that supports food banks globally. So we have a client intake and reporting system. It's a software that's completely web-based. And basically what it allows the food banks to do is do intake, so register their clients, and then do some pretty high-level reporting, both locally and then regionally, nationally, and we hope one day internationally as well. And our overarching social mission, or what we call our big, hairy, audacious goal, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Rockefeller habits, is to create the world's first global metric about hunger in developed nations. So we hear so often about hunger in underdeveloped and developing nations, but there's not a lot about hunger and poverty in the country that we live in some of our fellow developed nations. So overall, that's what we want to be able to provide to the world, and we definitely have the system and the data to be able to do that.
Okay, I will go next because I'm in the middle, and that's usually what happens. My name is Ryan Porter. I am the CEO and one of the founders of a company called Raise Your Flag. And what Raise Your Flag does is it is a workplace alternative for university and college. I'm not sure if the people in this room are familiar with this, but if I asked you to guess the amount of, or the percentage of high school students that didn't go to university and college, how many people in this room thinks it's maybe under 15%? How many people in this room think it's under 25%? All right, a few hands. Under 35%. Under 50%. Over 50%. Okay, interesting. So it's actually about 45% of young people in Canada do not go on to university or college as their primary post-secondary destination. And if you think about the 12 years of formal education that lead up to that point, it's all trying to funnel them into college or university. And if they don't go, they're screwed, right? They're left with very few options, and the support systems don't exist like they exist for those who go off to university and college. So what Raise Your Flag does is it provides them that same opportunity to talk about their post-secondary pathway the same way a university or college student could talk about their post-secondary pathway. We're very early stage. We've signed a few customers, with a few thousand users on the site. We went through the JOLT Accelerator program, which is housed here in Mars. And our big, hairy, audacious goal is about putting crappy schools out of business and lowering youth unemployment.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Lee. I'm the Executive Director at Scadding Court Community Centre. Scadding Court is a multi-service center, so we really service people from cradle to grave. And, a gamut of programs from recreation to law reform, internationally and international development in different countries with marginalized youth. From Toronto, working with marginalized youth in other countries like in India, Ghana. But I'm not going to talk about those particular programs. So we've got a large array of programs. But the program that I guess we're here to talk about tonight is around entrepreneurs. So one of the programs that we've done, and we're going into our fourth year now, is the issue of access for entrepreneurs to actually practice their trade. What we see is that there's a lot of programs out there would help you put a business plan together, give you a mentor, even provide you with some capital to get your businesses going. But the problem that we saw in Toronto is affordability in terms of actual retail or industrial space for entrepreneurs to actually practice and implement what they've learned. So that's not accessible. So what we've done is that we've taken shipping containers and modified them into retail stalls. And we rent them out for $11 a day for folks. And we started off, which I'll talk more about later, we started off with 4 stalls, and now we're up to 19 stalls, and we're expanding the markets now with private developers and using their land while the development process is going on. So I look forward to sharing more of that with you folks.
Awesome. I'm, of course, mindful of the ever-ticking evil red clock, but I noticed that everyone introduced their venture, which is amazing, but not how you got here. So I want to take a minute to just hear some of the stories of what started you off and what brought you to the place that you are now, because I think that those are always very informative. Ryan, I know you have a really interesting one because I read it for our blog on SocialFinance.ca, which you should all go read. So you can start.
Yes, so for the past 8 or 9 years, I've actually been traveling across Canada and the United States speaking to high school students. So I've spoken to about 950,000 kids to date. I was lucky enough to write a book and have it published specifically about, for high school students about post-secondary decisions. 3 years ago, I was speaking at a conference for a group of high school students that were not going off to college university. So they basically bring all these kids together, they listen to me speak for an hour, and then they go off and they apply at the local theater or the local restaurant or whatever. And so I got on stage, did my hour, I get off stage, and this kid came and introduced himself to me as Michael, like chin quivering, ready to cry. He thanks me for being there. And then he tells me that his friends and his family don't know that he's at the conference that day. And when I asked him, like, dude, what are you talking about? He said, do you have any idea how embarrassing it is when all of your friends are opening up a university acceptance letter and you're the loser in the corner who doesn't know what he's doing with his life? And I was like, wow, that sucks to be Michael, right? Because at that time, I'm thinking Michael's part of the maybe 10% in Canada that don't go to university or college. So I'm driving home, I'm just thinking about Michael the entire time. I get home and I start Googling about Michael and about the percentages, and I started discovering kind of what that problem looks like. And in my opinion, that 45%, that's not the problem. The problem is we think that that's a problem. And that tells us that we haven't been doing our job for 12 years leading up to that problem. And so once I kind of got a little bit versed in that problem, I started making some decisions around, I want to do something to help Michael. Like, Michael deserves to be just as excited as his university-bound classmates are when they're opening up a university acceptance letter. And that's really where Raise Your Flag was birthed from.
Kevin?
Yeah, how our program got started was actually based on 3 different factors. One is in terms of, from a design point of view, I don't know if people know Dundas and Bathurst. In that corner there, it used to be a designated, unused, underutilized public space. And there's a lot of public space that is underutilized in this city as well as in many, many other cities. So that's number one. Number two was that what we could see was that a lot of our clients were participating, young people and so forth, participating in the programs that are out there for youth and adults or whatever to become entrepreneurs and to start a business. And the feedback that we got was that that's all great and fine, but when they want us to sign a 3 to 5 year lease on a small retail space that's brick and mortar, from a business plan perspective of capital to start the business, they just couldn't do it, and that prevented a lot of young people, newcomers, people who are transitioning careers because they got laid off on Bay Street and they have to do something. So they were running into an access problem in terms of actual practice. So that was another reason. And the third reason was to bring economic viability to a depressed area. How can we transform a public space that is both generating and helping the local economy and individuals as well as public space? So those were the 3 reasons that drove us to start the program, and I'll talk about the capital in a little while, about how we finance it. And you'll be surprised that, actually, it's very attractive to investors because we guarantee your return and you get a social dividend back as well. So I don't know if I answered your question, Jarrett.
We'll come back to that in a little bit. We can roll it out. We've got a little bit of time. Emily?
Well, it definitely wasn't on purpose that I'm here today. Looking back, I never would have thought that today I would be sitting up here being called an entrepreneur. I actually had never even considered a career or involvement in business at all. So I took a very traditional path to education. I love to learn, and I went away to school to be a high school drama and English teacher. And on probably my very first day of school, they did a poll of the classroom, and they asked, who of you drama students sitting here wants to be an actor? And I certainly didn't raise my hand for that. And they said, who wants to be this and this? And then they said, who wants to be a teacher? And you could actually hear the rumble of hands go up. And I was like, I might be going about this the wrong way. And I kind of figured I made it here. I'm in school. I love what I'm taking. And I really just thought if I could continue to learn, I would find out where I was supposed to be. And I did. And I started working for nonprofits. So what I decided I wanted to do was work in PR in the culture industry. So I started doing internships with theaters and other nonprofits. I really learned that I like helping people, and I love the not-for-profit idea. And this isn't meant to be critical of any of the nonprofits I worked for, but I felt that there just wasn't a good grasp of business. And well, there's so many people that were so passionate about what they were doing. I couldn't help to think that if a little bit more business savvy was applied, that they could probably do a whole lot more. So that led me actually to do an MBA, which, and some of my classmates are sitting in the room. I went from a very, very liberal social justice communications program, which ended up being my major by the time I finished my undergrad, to an MBA. So there was these two conflicting sides of me. I really did love business, but I really did love helping people. And I felt that there was this conflict that everyone thought existed between these two things. And I really spent the time in my MBA trying to convince people that it didn't have to be there. And it helped me make some friends, but it definitely caused some rifts with some of my classmates. I looked at things quite a bit differently, but I walked away from that experience knowing that what I was going to do in my life was going to combine those two things. I started running my own consulting business, and then I kind of got poached to work at an agency to do marketing for nonprofits. And then the agency was running Link to Feed on the side, and I got pushed into that, begrudgingly at first. Again, like I didn't know anything about software, I didn't know anything about food banks. And on my very first day, I read a report about, it's actually called the Hunger Study. It's done every year in Canada. It was actually just recently released. And I read it and I thought, whoa, there's a job to be done here. And that was about 2 years ago. And since then, my goal has been to grow Link to Feed because there's a lot of people in these countries that need our help. And we always say you can't end hunger if you don't understand it. So my passion is, it was accidental, but it was bringing data into the not-for-profit space and being able to see how that can impact globally.
Very cool. All right, thanks. Emily, you kind of touched on this. Kevin, you touched on this in your remarks too, but what differentiates a social entrepreneur from a regular entrepreneur is the social part. But when it comes to raising money, sometimes that can be a tension. One of the entrepreneurs that I work with at the Mars Center for Impact Investing, he said to me the other day, we used to have social impact on the front burner, and then we put it on the back burner, and we would say that it was core to what we did, but it wasn't something we led with. We led with the numbers, and now when we're walking out the door, we mention that we don't sell cigarettes to babies, and that's about the size of it. So in terms of your enterprises and in seeking capital or in talking about what you do with people, how have you found that tension? And Emily, since you were already talking about it.
Yeah, I don't think something can be at the core of what you do unless it really is something that you lead with. For us, our social mission is always the forefront. It's the first story that we tell to anyone. And if someone that we're talking to doesn't understand that or they don't believe in it, they're going to realize that that's the purpose of our business, and it's going to come up. And I would rather have that barrier be there in the beginning, because while you need capital and you need funding, if someone doesn't see the value that you're providing to the world, and that really is the core of your business, you're not going to go very far with them. So we always lead with it. There's been times where I think it's confused people and thought, oh, maybe this can't be a valid business venture because there is a social mission. But I mean, the business side and the numbers really demonstrate that there is a strong case for both. So it hasn't been a barrier to us so far, and I think in the essence, as a barrier, it would just kind of have to end that relationship.
Brian?
Yeah, I think Emily kind of touched on this, that it's a little bit of a balancing act. But I find that there's not really this you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. And I guess what I mean is, being a social entrepreneur isn't a hall pass to be a crappy entrepreneur, right? It's not like, well, I'm a social venture, so we really don't need to work. Your job is to display and show that your business is a viable business and there's numbers behind it and there's going to be growth and you're heading in that direction. That being said, the story is super important. And one thing that we actually struggle with right now, I'm meeting with investors every single week, and I always have to make the decision, am I going in there and am I going to lead with this social thing or am I going to lead with the business thing? And 9 times out of 10, I lead with the business thing. And that's because that's something that everybody understands. And I'm sure we'll probably talk about it tonight, but there's also not that many impact investors in the space, right? Impact investors usually started off as an investor, right? The majority of their career was focusing on those numbers and that viable business plan. And so you have to always be able to display and talk about that value. And really quickly, anecdotally, a couple of weeks ago, I met with a venture capitalist, and we started talking about our business. They were into it. Like, they understood the business, they saw the metrics, they saw the growth, they saw the potential. And then I happened to mention a fund that was also looking at ending youth homelessness. And one of the managing partners of this fund was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't try to tell me you're gonna go off and be this like end youth homelessness thing in the world, because I don't know if we fund stuff like that. And it just goes to show kind of like there is this mentality out there that it needs to be one or the other. But as Emily mentioned, it's really trying to combine both into one succinct story and still have that viable business option there.
Yeah, I want to just echo what both of my colleagues on the panel here have just said. What we do is that we don't differentiate between the two. It's like we don't see ourselves as profit-making or non-profit. In actual fact, what our model is, and our social franchising model, is a combination of both. What we do is that we've devised out a product which is, if you want to call it profit-making. Our vendors are all private businesses. They all have run their own businesses, and they're making money, and and that's whatever. They pay their rent, and the rent that they pay, as I said, we started 4 years ago at $10 a day. We've raised the rent now to $11 a day. But however, within that formula, the payback is still there within 3 years, where the investment is recouped, and the agencies that are part of the model of the franchising gets a mixed money from the markets that they set up under the franchise, and then that helps to finance their staff person to continue to manage the marketplace for the vendors. And the vendors that we bring in is a variety of different people. People who are on Ontario Works, people who might be living in social housing, as well as entrepreneurs. We've got a business there where one guy used to be quite high in the hospitality industry, but just didn't want to do it anymore. He's enough of this running around. And so he's opened a little crepe shop, and he's content, So there's a variety of different people. And I guess what my point here is that I think the failure comes when we start to pigeonhole, as what Ryan has said and what Emily has said, where you're actually a nonprofit or a profit. What our approach is that we want to create a revenue stream for ourselves, as well as a revenue stream for the vendors, but more importantly, we collectively create a social dividend. That's why our board is willing to invest in containers. We keep some of our money in, like a lot of nonprofits, in GICs, and you're making under 1% on these conservative investments of the GICs. But yet, if you invest it in, let's say, one of our franchises, you'll be guaranteed to get your money back, and then you create a social dividend at the same time. So that's our approach, is not to pigeonhole it in the traditional sense, like what my two colleagues here have expressed. And I think they're right on, in terms of that way of approaching the social enterprise concept, or as it exists now. And I think there has to be a transformation of that definition, in order to attract, I think, capital, where you do not get responses, Ryan, like what you got. It's like, you're going to end, youth homelessness, And I think people need to be able to understand that actually ending youth homelessness is actually a good thing for the economy. It's a good thing for the community and our society, and that is a worthwhile investment because that social dividend translates into, a more thriving environment for all of us.
Right on. You actually led right into the next question that I was going to ask, so that's fantastic, which is about the nonprofit for-profit divide, particularly from like a regulatory standpoint or from a standpoint of like an institutional standpoint. And basically the question is, and it may be a pretty easy question to answer, but are we too inflexible where we are right now? And if you had like something that you could change, what would it be? So from a regulatory standpoint, like Kevin, you run a nonprofit, and I don't know how do you wall off your social enterprise from your nonprofit so you don't get in trouble, for example?
Yeah, to me, that's not that much of an issue. To me, more of the regulatory issues is actually with the municipality, with the City of Toronto, and all the bylaws, with MLS. Of permits and, you could do this and you cannot do that. To us, that's more of a challenge, is in terms of that. In terms of us, we don't make a profit, okay? We do not make a profit. What we do is we generate enough revenues to continue our staffing where it's self-sufficient. The model that we run, actually, we haven't had to really apply for any grants for sustainability, okay? I think we got a Section 37 grant to kick it off with Councillor Vaughan to put up our first container as a demonstration one. But after that, it paid for it's already paid for, and then it started generating revenues from day one in order for us to employ our staff to manage the marketplace. And then that has escalated now to working with private developers in terms of our market at the Minto site. And we've started another one at City Place. And we're looking at other development sites that are being left empty because of land banking or whatever, and it's prime opportunities to get ventures off the ground. So in terms of, with CRA and whatever, if that's your question, we haven't encountered any issues because we don't make any money.
So taking that financial piece and kind of walking it out, you are obviously, two of you anyway, are looking to be scaling. And the question about scaling is how do you get funding? And Ryan touched on this earlier about the potential lack of impact investors. But are you looking for capital right now? And if so, kind of what's your process been? How have you found it? Do you have any tips? Do you have any laments, Ryan?
Yeah, so first of all, I remember before, so right now we are neck deep in a fundraising round. We're raising a seed round right now as I speak. And I used to listen to other entrepreneurs talk about like, fundraising is just a soul-sucking activity and it sucks. And I was like, can't be that bad. Like, you guys are getting money for your company. And then I started fundraising, and it's a soul-sucking activity. A million different ways for people to tell you no, that your company isn't in their wheelhouse, it's not part of their investment thesis, you're too early, you're not, you're too late for our type of thing. We only want the people raised. So, yes, so to answer your question, we're raising money. We're raising a mixture of traditional VC, We've got a little bit of angel money on the table, and we have some institutional money as well that's on the table. Everybody, of course, waiting for a true VC to come in and be the anchor or the lead, and they typically want to see somebody from San Francisco. So I will be down in San Francisco on Monday for a week to try to follow up on some leads. But it's an interesting process. And you'll probably hear this advice from quite a few people, and I will echo it as much as possible, that you should really be holding off on raising money until you really absolutely need to raise money. And then also realize that it'll take at least twice as long as you imagine right now to raise the amount of money that you want to raise.
So we've got kind of lucky. As I said before, Link to Feed actually was part of another business previously. So we actually grew and scaled Link to Feed beside a company that was already recognizing profits and had been in existence for 10 years. So we were able to invest money differently into our platform and our people for Link to Feed. And then when we spun it off this year, we were fortunate in the sense that we had sales that we brought over and we had existing clients. That being said, we've had some soul-sucking activities of our own, not the traditional VC side, but we actually did take advantage of some government funding, which as a business person, I actually didn't even know was available, but we were lucky enough to get SOFI funding and NRC funding to help support us. So as part of the spin-off in our international scale, we're rebuilding our entire platform for scale and growth, which is a huge undertaking for anyone here who's in tech. Developers, good ones, they're not cheap, and with the amount of stake in our platform, we wanted to make sure we had the best talent. So we did have those sources of funding. Also, two of our primary shareholders do have a lot of interest in other business, and we're able to put in a good amount of shareholder capital to bridge. And now we're at a good place with the different options of funding that we have. But and the government funding is great. It's very much like VCs. Just double the timeline you think it's going to take. Put your best foot forward the first time, because you may not hear for 6 months. It could be radio silence, and then that could be the point where your application is the only thing that will speak for you. It is a good route, just you have to be patient in a different way to undergo that side.
We take a different approach in terms of capital, in terms of, most social ventures go after, impact in investors and so forth. We are looking at that too, but what we're more interested in is actually using the model which will stand up commercially with any banker, that we could demonstrate through, past practice of through our books, that, you'll get your money back. So, social impact investors will lend you money, but the interest rates they're charging is not that much different than from the commercial banks, Sure, they'll take a higher risk, which is great, all right? But our approach is to come up with, a business model of financing that is not reliant on just, either the traditional banks or social impact investors. We're actually starting to look at creating a investment for nonprofits to invest in. That rather than you putting your $1 million into GICs and getting 1 point on the money, I think we are coming up with a proposal to create a fund which nonprofits can actually invest their surpluses and reserves, which will be safeguarded with a higher return, but also with a social impact. That's why when we apply for grants, we have got grants like from the Toronto Community Foundation to work with KPMG to come up with a social financing model, okay, through a franchise to raise capital. So that's where our approach is to look at it in a little different way than, the either or the or, but to create your own mechanism for capital and for financing. I'm quite sure that, if products are developed which are impactful, generates, sustainability plus a return, the capital will come. That's our experience with it. If your product is, not good, and you're not going to make an impact socially or from a revenue standpoint for your partners, be it their vendors or partners, it's not going to work. I mean, you could, raise all the money you want, but if you're not successful, if people are not walking away with what they feel they should have and they're entitled to, be it your partner, a private investor, or a company, it's not going to happen. So that's why when Emily and Ryan were talking about this merging of the nonprofit and the for-profit, I think that is a real concept that needs to be further developed within our country for social entrepreneurs.
On the topic of merging, I did want to touch on, we're doing the same thing to investors that we do to businesses and social-oriented organizations, is that just because an investor is a traditional investor that invests in corporate-type business, it doesn't mean that they don't have a social component. It doesn't mean that they're not going to want to hear your social story. They're hearing lots of pitches from people who probably look like you and sound like you and have maybe the same level of experience. And if you can use your social mission as a one-up, as that extra thing to get in front of them so that when they walk away after hearing 10 presentations in a day, that you're the one that sticks out in their mind, I encourage you to do that. Don't think of an investor as someone who wouldn't be interested in your social impact just because they're considered to be not an impact investor.
Yeah, and I think one of the parts of the question that you asked was even like, how do you know which investors to approach or something along those lines? I think, Emily's kind of dancing around it or touching on this right now as well, is that like when you're approaching investors, for those people that are ever looking at raising money, like if you have a social cause and you are a social entrepreneur, look for those investors that might have a backstory that matches up with something that you're working on. Like, one of the things that we do at Raise Your Flag is when I'm looking for investors, I target investors that come from like a blue collar background, that they mentioned at some TechCrunch Disrupt conference that their dad worked in a factory, and I'm like, this person's going to get exactly what we're talking about. And then that usually opens the door for at least a conversation, right? And those are the type of people that we approach, are people that have at some point tweeted something out, said something at a conference, posted a YouTube video that happened to mention something that overlaps with our mission at Raise Your Flag.
Don't be afraid to stalk your investors.
It's called research.
The lesson that I'm getting from this.
Research.
Let me just pick up on Ryan's point here in terms of what he just said. And I think it's key, is that rather than you always thinking about, how do I chase the investors? You've got to start to, turn that around and have them come to you, all right? And they're coming to you because, not for the social good as the first and foremost, I think it's for their needs, in terms of a corporation. And the example that I'm going to use is Minto. They came to us and said, wow, what a concept. We've got empty land. What can we do together? That's a major investment on their part in terms of the site prep and, what else are they paying for? Anyways, the advertising and all of that. So I think that's the key, Ryan, what you try to hit on is, yes, you have to do the chasing, but I think you create the environment where, you're not going to be the only person chasing, but you want them to come and talk to you as well as a social, entrepreneur.
So we're here at Mars, and obviously Entrepreneurship E101 is a great resource. But for those of you who have who've been involved in the social entrepreneurship business, what are some of the supports that you have received? Both, this is also personally too. So I spoke on I asked a personal question, and I still haven't received a personal response, so I might come back around to the lightning round for you two. But what kinds of supports have you received? What have you relied on? And where do you think are supports that entrepreneurs maybe are lacking that you would love to see be more robust?
Sure. So I noticed that one thing, especially being in Toronto, that there's an incredible support network that exists, but it's like just below the surface. And like before, so we did Raise Your Flag for a year kind of on our own. And then we got tapped into not only the Mars ecosystem, but the ecosystem that it led us to and the connections that came with it. And like we started meeting all of these people, and we started recognizing all of these places in our city that had these supports for new entrepreneurs. And I was like, this was here the whole time, like just here, and I couldn't see it. So I find that, you know, as new budding second time, first time entrepreneurs, it is so important to just network. And when I say network, I don't even mean like hand out business cards at events. I mean like really find those people whose passion it is to move business forward, right? Those people exist. I meet with them every single day. And like, who do you need to meet? How can I introduce? How can I help you? Those are the people that you need to get tapped into, because those are the people that can kind of let you see that layer that exists here in the city just below, you know, what's visible. And if you want to talk about like personal supports, because I know that's part of it, you know, people are going to talk about balance a lot and about finding some support in areas that aren't just about business, and that's really key. If you're going to be doing a business, it is going to consume your life. You're going to go to sleep thinking about it. You're going to wake up in your sleep talking about it. Your breakfast is going to taste like it. You need to find those outlets that allow you to just forget about it for a second. I'm lucky enough to have a gym nearby and a motorcycle, and both of those things help me kind of support my mental health when it comes to, and that's not a joke about mental health, that's me saying, you need that when you're running a business. You need to find supports and things that have nothing to do with your business, that just allow you to just maybe forget about it for 45 minutes or 2 hours a day.
For us, our biggest support has really been our clients, the people using our system. Any entrepreneur has bad days. I think, you know, some ways maybe because I consider myself a social entrepreneur, I take things a little bit harder because I really feel that what we're doing is going to change the world. It's going to make a big difference. And some days, those down days are hard because you're thinking, I have something that's so valuable for people that's going to make such a difference. And, you know, this happened and it's not working, or this issue here. And I get down, and honestly, our clients seem to call me on those days, and they usually call with an idea. We're so lucky that our clients call us with ideas all the time, with feedback, not always feedback that we want to hear, but, you know, positive and negative. And there's been 3 different times when I've been kind of having a bad day, you know, questioning myself, which I think every entrepreneur does, but is very afraid to talk about. And they rally me. I had someone call, and they had been using our product, and they were running a report, and they called to tell me that they just thought that our product was going to change the world. Like, they were doing a report, and they saw the impact that it was having, and it was starting great dialogue, and they were like, we just wanted to call to tell you, like, we think you can change the world. Like, are you guys aware of that? And we were like, I was like, well, that's kind of the plan. But I really needed it that day, and I'm really lucky to have 2 of my clients in the room today, who have, so they're from the Ontario Association of Food Banks, which was the first province in Canada to decide to do an entire provincial rollout of our software. So we're about 85% of the way through, 90 maybe, and so pretty soon they're gonna have real-time data on food bank usage across the whole province. And it's people like the Ontario Association of Food Banks and organizations like that that are willing to innovate and take a risk that have made a difference for us. From a personal perspective, I'm completely on the page that you just need to shut off from what you're doing. It is, like, my breakfast does taste like Link to Feed, and that's not what I want to eat every morning. And it's hard because I think a lot of entrepreneurs are kind of type A. Like, you get an idea and you run with it and you become obsessed. And to you, that is enjoyable, but it's not always healthy. And you have to take something out of the equation that is just you. And For me, it was choosing to run a marathon this year, which I know sounds stupid because you're like, why would you ever want to do that? And plus, why would you want to do that while running a business? And it made me tired and my limbs hurt. But it was one thing in my life that I did just for myself. And after the marathon, I had some interesting injuries and I've had to take a break, just got back into running, and I realized for me, like, that's it. That's my shut-off. And I just encourage all of you to find what it is. Maybe it's watching like really bad TV, or I don't know, going to the gym. It doesn't matter what it is, but you need to take that time away from your concept or you lose passion. Like if I don't take time away, I feel it drain out every day. And then I go for my long run and it fills back up again. And I have really supportive friends and family. I do want to give them a shout out.
For me, in terms of you folks and myself and my team, is that yes, you folks have a idea, you folks have the concept in your head, okay, or however far you've gotten. But what's important is that you don't do it alone, okay? I don't mean you have to do it with a business partner, but you don't do it alone in terms of how you're going to move and scale your business, okay? That even if it's, bouncing ideas, sharing with families or friends or bring in other people, that is a key ingredient. The second point is this. What you're doing is very important, which means you should not give up hope in terms of what your idea is, no matter if, the conventional wisdom is you're out in outer space, We've done a lot of things which people thought were outer space, like putting 200 rainbow trout into a swimming pool so kids could have access to go fishing, in the city. People thought we were crazy to do that. So we've been doing it for 13 years. Back 15 years ago, we started the first community garden in Toronto. The city of Toronto thought we were crazy to ripping up lawns, But look how many community gardens are around today. So don't give up hope. The reason why that's important is, I believe this city, this province, and this country is reliant on entrepreneurs like the ones in this room and outside, okay? In terms of making our community, our city, our country vibrant and to be economically competitive on a global sense. And that's gonna come from you folks, okay? At the end of the day, it's gonna come from small entrepreneurs who someday maybe become multinationals, but it's gonna have to rebuild, not based on the multinational model, but based on what my colleagues are doing and based on what you folks are doing or thinking about doing. So I think that is key in terms of what you're doing is not just something for yourselves, okay? It's not just that, whatever venture you're in, because what you're really doing is participating with a collective in terms of revamping the way how economy works. And I think that's what is most thrilling about Mars and about the work that used to do and series like this and the workshops. So I don't think that's a waste of taxpayers' money at all. I think it's a good social and economic investment. And that investment, believe it or not, folks, is working. The reason why it's working is that all you folks are here. And to me, that demonstrates good public policy in terms of supporting entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs within our country and within our province. So in terms of, get away and do something else, go traveling once in a while and get away from everything. Because that's how we came up with the concept, is that the idea about containers is really nothing innovative at all. Developing countries in Africa, in Asia, have been using containers for multi-years, except that now we've picked up on it, and our containers aren't as rusty, and they might look a little better because we could afford the paint, But if you go to Ghana, you'll see people operating a little butcher shop, a hair-cutting place, dress alteration, whatever, in a space that's 5 by 6. So it's a matter of, it's really not a new concept. It's just taking a concept and applying it appropriately, culturally, and so forth, within our context. And I think that's what your business, whatever your business is, that's a key. How is it in line with the context that we're currently in, as well as what is the context as it goes forward, as things develop, okay, in terms of design, for instance, on streets and so forth.
So you talked about public policy and sort of the macro trends, national, provincial, what have you. Canada and Ontario are viewed as innovative places. I mean, I was in San Francisco relatively recently, and lots of folks that are capitalizing really awesome ideas are capitalizing ideas from here, but then they take them elsewhere to commercialize. So if it is the case that we're not particularly good at implementation or commercialization here, why do you think that's the case? And if not, then you can speak to that as well. Ryan here.
Yeah, I don't know if that's particularly true. I just don't think that we've hit that level of maturity that some other markets have seen, right? Like, if we're comparing, one of the worst things that we can do is compare ourselves to places like Silicon Valley. Like, Toronto is not Silicon Valley. We need to stop trying to be like them. Yeah, there's great things happening down there. Fantastic companies, fantastic entrepreneurs. There's a ton of money flowing. It's a great place to be for entrepreneurship and technology and all this great stuff. I think what's lacking is that blueprint of a Toronto-based company that kind of went through that process and came out on the other side of tremendous, overwhelming success. We've got a few of them that are like really almost there. Like, we've got Shopify and we've got Hootsuite, and I'm not just talking about Canada here. We've got a few of these companies that are like, oh, these companies are just going to be ridiculous in 2, 3, 4, even more ridiculous than they are right now. So I think what we need to do is, first of all, stop comparing ourselves to Silicon Valley and start really trying to cultivate our own culture of entrepreneurship here in Canada, in Ontario, and in Toronto. And that's one of the things I think that this is about. It's saying, okay, how are we different, and how can we kind of capitalize on our differences and really start to show Toronto as this, hub of innovation? And I think that happens the second we stop comparing ourselves to our older brother on the other side of the border.
The other thing, Jared, is I'm not so sure if, the idea or the concept of commercialization is where we should be going, okay? That's one thing. Because, commercialization sort of have certain connotations of, of what the construct that exists now. Okay, is in terms of how do we commercialize something to make a profit. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making revenues. I think it's important. But I think what Ryan is saying is, this is an opportunity in terms of this burgeoning body of folks in this room and outside this room, is to reconstruct or reestablish what that concept is, and not to just follow the American way of, as that they are the leaders. No, I believe the leaders are right here, in terms of how this whole evolution, that's very Canadian, and that's something I think we should be very proud of, that it is very Canadian, and not to just revert it back to, oh, what are our American cousins doing? Let's see if it's in line with that. you know? And I think that's the way how Canada has been going since its establishment, you know, politically, militarily, commercially, and everything. And I think it's an opportunity now in the 21st century to actually come up with a new construct that Ryan is speaking about to that. So I think public policy is a key piece, and the public policy is driven in terms of, you know, this area of work is driven by you folks, okay? Is driven by entrepreneurs that are in this room and that are, you know, in this city and in this country. So I think there should be mechanisms whereby, through Mars, that, you know, this issue gets discussed, this policy issue, you know, that someone needs to take a leadership role in terms of defining out what is the proper construct and the policies that should evolve through government, municipally, provincially, and nationally, to come up with a Canadian model. You know, and it's there. It's there. I mean, I hear it. It's there from my two colleagues and from folks of what you're doing out there, which is not happening elsewhere.
Not to take too long to plug something that we do here, but you touched on thought leadership in that field, and Mars is the Canadian representative on the National Advisory Board for the Social Impact Investing Task Force. So the G8, G7 put together a task force on social finance. Every government does its own thing. Mars is a big part of Canada's unique blueprint and creating that kind of construct. So to take that a little bit further and to also keep it tight, what is the one thing about Canada then that's different and better? And particularly regarding the social enterprise landscape. Full disclosure, I was born in the US, but I'm also Canadian. And so I think that one of the interesting things that we suck at doing here is saying that we're good at things. So what are we good at? One thing, everybody, and keep it close.
Well, Canadians internationally really have a great reputation for being socially conscious. So the brand is kind of already in our country's DNA. So being able to take advantage of that and taking your product and saying, we're from Canada, this is where we came. People understand, they get it. But, and I will kind of throw a wrench into things, it's not always gonna happen that way. You're not always gonna go south of the border and you say, look at us, we're this socially conscious Canadian company, because sometimes you get a little pat on the head and isn't that cute? So I think sometimes the reason why we don't have these massive Canadian successes is because you're so tempted to slip south of the border and become an American company, because the market's so big that a lot of companies do, the population size alone is a huge cornerstone for the market. So as Canadians take advantage of our Canadian heritage, no, it's not always going to work for us. And, you know, Canadians are great because they're socially conscious, but like you said, we can't brag about ourselves. We're too humble, and the squeaky wheel gets oiled. So at some point, we're going to have to set up and ask for credit for the good work that we're doing as entrepreneurs here in Canada.
Yeah, I'll keep it as, you know, tight as possible here. Loyalty and community. I feel like if we were to compare ourselves to those companies south of the border, or whatever is happening in different parts of the world, I feel like our sense of community and commitment to that community is just stronger here. I don't meet somebody who I tell what we're doing at Raise Your Flag, or they tell me their idea, and they're like, whoa, hold on. Before I tell you this next thing, you need to sign a non-disclosure because I don't want this leaving this room. Like, I have never run into that situation, but when I'm reading like the Hacker News forums, or when I'm reading these stories and experiences from other entrepreneurs that are south of the border, they're like, yeah, we have a non-disclosure ready to go at any time because we don't want people stealing our ideas. Here, I have to tell people to stop giving me help sometimes because they're like, oh, here's someone else I thought you could talk to. Oh, here's someone else you should talk to. Oh, here's somewhere you should go. Like, I just think the sense of community here is so strong. And I feel like we're loyal. Like, I would like to see the graph of like employee tenure in a Canadian company versus an American company. I have no idea what those numbers are, but in my mind, I'd like to think that, especially in the tech world, you know, it's it's not this social norm for you to just jump around 1 year here, 1 year there, 1 year there, and have a resume that's like Facebook, Google, Twitter, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm doing my own startup. Like the people that I meet here are with their companies like 5 years, 7 years. They were one of the founders and they're still there today. So loyalty, community, I will stop talking.
I'll be very quick. I think, is we've got to use our inferiority complex that Canadians have against, with the Americans, because we always, were worldwide. They also, and that's also a very, what should I say, a illusion. That's been bought in by Canadians and bought in globally. That, when you compare it to the Americans, well, the Canadians are whatever. They're not that essential. Well, that's not true. And I think that's where Canadians and entrepreneurs like yourselves need to believe in yourselves, not compare in terms of the balance sheets with Google, at this point, but to keep moving, on. And I echo what Ryan and Aaron have said about, that I think you should be proud and you should continue with how you're moving forward. And don't think about the Americans. That's what I say. Don't think about them. You need to think about yourself. Okay, you need to think about your own business and how it's going to get implemented, how you're going to scale it without comparing yourselves to something that's really, if you think about it, why?
So in addition to being an American and Canadian, I'm also a millennial. So I'm accustomed to having people tell me all sorts of things about my generation, like, you're the most entitled generation ever and you want everything handed to you. Or you're also a magical unicorn that only wants to do like really beautiful things that will make everybody happy. As a millennial, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in terms of young people seeking jobs, looking for meaningful career opportunities? Ryan, you're the obvious starting point for this, but you're a millennial and you obviously work with a considerable amount of young people at a community center. So that's kind of my...
Yeah, so I think, where do I start? How do I unpackage this one? So first of all, let's just be really clear. The largest generation gap that's ever existed in history it exists right now between millennials and their parents. They have more in common with their grandparents than they do with their own parents. I'm happy to discuss why this is true afterwards. But I don't think, look, it's not easy being a young person right now. It isn't, because all of the stuff that, that our parents knew to be true is no longer true. And nobody actually knows what is true. People are scrambling to figure it out. How do we educate these people? How do we prepare them for jobs? When they are in jobs, how do we train them? How do we onboard them? How do we make sure that they can communicate with the other generations in the workplace? Nobody knows, and it's super confusing. And so the original question was, I'm asking you.
Okay.
I'm trying to wrap this up here.
Trends in terms of millennials seeking jobs.
Yes, so they want to be a part of something that brings value and meaning, right? So that's one of the things that we do know about this generation, is that they're not going to be the 9 to 5, everything about this company and only this company. They're going to want more, and they want to be a part of companies that are doing something good. And I know that sounds super generic, but we had a startup open house last week, I believe, in the building. And I had some students come and talk to me, and they're like, we just want to be part of a startup. And I'm like, you clearly have not been a part of a startup, because no, you do not. Like, this is what happens when you are part of... I'm a 14-year-old girl, and I'm aging at a ridiculous pace right now. And I said, why? And they said, because startups are changing the world. And I thought that really spoke to this generation and what they want from the companies that they're going to be joining. They want to be a part of something that they perceive is changing the world. And that could be in communication, that could be in healthcare, that could be in education, that could be in a photo sharing app. If they believe it's making the world a better place, they want to be a part of it.
Echo all of that. That was very well said. But I think part of it too is there's a lifestyle component. So there's the wanting to be part of something meaningful, and I think I mean, part of that is watching what happened to our parents and their jobs that they worked at for 20, 30 years, and then all of a sudden you're in high school and, you know, mom or dad aren't working anymore. I think part of it is, you know, you're saying we don't know what's true, and entrepreneurship is a chance for this generation to create their own truth, to find their own way, and learn about it on their own terms. And although not everyone in our company is an official entrepreneur, they don't own the business, but everyone that works for us is very entrepreneurial, and they want the lifestyle of an entrepreneur. So we give it to them. Our staff have, you know, I won't say free reign, but if you need to work from home for a day or you need to work on the road, we have our business set up to have that flexibility. We have an open vacation policy. So the policy is if you need a day off, you know what you need more than us, and take it. Especially working in a startup, you work stupid hours. And if you need to take more than 2 weeks, then you should be able to do so. So incorporating those lifestyle elements, working from home, vacation, encouraging travel, encouraging volunteerism, those are all the things that speak to this generation. And although we are potentially the most entitled generation ever, those are the benefits. I don't get a lot of people who come in and the first thing they ask about is salary. They ask about lifestyle, the lifestyle of the company. So that's where, you know, I see the millennial piece playing into our business, and I'm sure a lot of other businesses too.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's been well said by these two in terms of, you know, things aren't the way they used to be. And I think the young people know that, okay? They're not stupid. They know because they've been trying to get a job, they've got a graduate degree, and they're still not employed. So I think the reality of, you know, where our economy is at in terms of prospects, they know what the challenges and the barriers are. And I think what is being said here is that this movement, okay, of what you folks are doing and what Mars is doing in terms of promoting entrepreneurship and, you know, social impact, all of that, that is part of what the evolution needs to be, you know, or revolution needs to be in terms of the economy. If we're going to be able to sustain the quality of life that we have, the social safety net that we have, where, you know, there is continuing hope. And I think that's a thing that I see a lot of in the young people that we work with in marginalized community is, you know, the notion of hope. For some folks here, as Ryan said, you know, life was different in terms of employment. That, you know, you go into GM and you're gonna die there with a pension, you know, like that. That doesn't exist anymore. But the young people, I believe they understand that. They know that. The reason why they do is because they have to live it, you know. So I think to keep pushing in terms of the progression of development of individuals and of how we do things and why we do them, I think is essential. And that sort of ties into the policy piece, that sort of ties into what you're doing, you know, creating social impact and having, you know, and be able to make a living out of it too. I mean, so I think that's one of the things that our sector needs to understand, that, you know, for people to make a living, a good living, you know, that's, you know, where it's not minimum wage, is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
So I'm mindful of the time. I just want to encourage people, we're going to have some Q&A time. So if you have a question, please make your way to a microphone now, just so I can get an eyeball of how we're doing. And then I've got a few lightning round questions, and I emphasize lightning round questions. So what is the one thing you know now that you wish you could have told yourself when you started doing this?
You can't be afraid to fail. You'll just think about it too much and stress yourself out, and it's not productive. So accept that failure could be part of the equation and just move forward anyway.
Ryan?
Ego is the most poisonous thing for your business. Ego in product decisions, ego in any type of client meetings, when customers give you feedback, ego will absolutely 100% kill your business.
Don't be afraid okay, to ask in terms of for money, for assistance, for whatever. Because the only thing they could say is no. So you then go on to the next person or party and ask them. Someone down the line is going to say yes.
All right. And one more question, and this is in terms of what you guys do. Where do you see your biggest opportunities with your work in the next 5 years? Blue sky.
International expansion is a huge reality for us. We've had lots of interesting discussions with food bank organizations around the world. Creation of new modules. I said we get lots of feedback from our clients, so building other applications to support them. And then replicating something like Link to Feed in another sector, so another vertical, particularly poverty-driven would be our ideal.
Yeah, so I alluded to it at the very beginning when I talked about putting crappy schools out of business. I was being serious. I think that far too many people are paying far too much money for schools that are bringing far too little value. And so in the future, I believe that Raise Your Flag will be kind of that alternative that people talk about when it's like college, university, or should we check out Raise Your Flag to see what people are doing in the work world?
I think our thing is the political and the social economy that we are in, and that there needs to be new models because the existing ones is not working for everybody. It's working for a few. You know, at the end of the day, that's why you've got movements like the Occupy movement, where it's talking about the reality of the gap. All right. So I think in terms of what our approach is, there's going to be a lot of growth in terms of scaling and so forth.
All right.
First of all, thank you, panel, for a great discussion. First, I have to apologize. I am a boomer, so
That's
I have to
okay.
frame this. Two quick questions. One for Ryan. I'm still trying to get a sense of what you're providing because I'm thinking an workplace alternate for universities and colleges. I'm thinking Germany because the stigma is not there in terms of, well, if not academics, there's a great program for the trades in terms of it's there. We don't have it here. So I'm trying to get a sense of that. And a general question, nobody mentioned crowdfunding, crowdsourcing or bootstrapping at all. You talked about the usual ways of getting money. Why?
Yeah, so I'll obviously tackle the first one because it was directed at me. So what we do when I'm talking about a workplace alternative, think about a student going to school for computer science. The second they open their degree, they're like, I'm going to school for computer science. And it's like, you're going to be studying a bunch of courses that really have, that really have nothing to do, but you know what courses you need to take, you know which classes you need to take, you know which grades you need to get in order to get that degree at the end. What about the student that wants to be a fashion designer and doesn't want to go to university or college? How do they talk about that? What about the person that wants to be a customer service manager? How do they talk about those things? So the base unit of measurement on Raise Your Flag is the career path. Everything on Raise Your Flag is done as a path. Here you are, 17 years old, with very limited work experience and a very little bit of education. Here's what it takes to get from there to fashion designer. Your first job is going to be retail. Here are all the people that you can talk to, and here's all the jobs that are available. The next one is going to be maybe you're going to be a tailor's assistant. The next one, maybe you're going to be a pattern cutter, and then maybe you're going to start doing your own fashion design. And then in between all those steps, we show them all of the industry training that they can get that will move them towards that ultimate goal of becoming a fashion designer. We introduce them to companies that will hire them, and we show them the job postings at every step on every path. Is that cleared up? And I'll continue talking about the second one. You asked about other types of funding. Yeah, just for the sake of time, we bootstrapped for a year. By bootstrapping, I mean I've got this little brown leather thing in my back pocket that has plastic cards in it, and money comes out when I put it into a machine. So we paid for the business with that. And then we were part of Jolts. We got a little bit of capital from them. We just started earning revenue, and now we're starting to look for some traditional forms. The reason I didn't talk about crowdfunding, because it didn't make sense for our business model.
We did do source funding for a patio, because that was a public space and everybody could use it. We are not going to crowdsource funding because you're getting back in some ways to the charity model. In terms of asking people, oh, help us finance, $100,000 to construct containers so people can practice a business so we could make revenues, So please, give us some money. So that's not the model we're going with, is the charity model, because that then really defeats the purpose of what our vision is, and what we're trying to do is to actually move away from the charity model. We will take money from charities not for the actual business, but for scaling it to other communities can learn and share. That's where we'll accept public grants, is to be able to information share what the model is and how do you do it, what are the challenges that you have in terms of setting up a marketplace within city bylaws and fabrication and all of that. That we're prepared to take money for, but not to to help to finance the program as a whole.
Yeah, we're also bootstrapped. A lot of, like I said, our capital is actually shareholder investment. So I would consider that a form of bootstrapping, and then very much bootstrapped in the sense that we spun Link to Feed off of another company. We considered crowdfunding. We think we have a great story to tell, and when we tell it, people get very excited. But when we thought about really the upfront investment that we would have to put into doing it and managing it, I really think that our time is better spent on getting sales. So actively pursuing new clients and building our business in that way. So that's the reasons that right now we've decided not to go for crowdfunding.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if that works perfect. So we touched on it a little bit tonight. We talked about maybe not going after venture capital funding too quickly, or maybe sort of relying on the social net more where you didn't know it quite existed. Were there specific milestones or markers that you missed at the time, but then in hindsight should have been more obvious, where you might want to have stopped, sort of slowed down, maybe refined your pitch, worked on your business plan that would sort of put you into a better place that you are today? And that's my question.
I'll kick this one off. Kind of the opposite. So we didn't go after VC funding, I've said. But from a business perspective, we went to a conference that has been absolutely phenomenal for our business just a few weeks ago. And we had considered doing it a year ago. And after going this year, I sat and I wondered, if we had an imperfect product that we brought to market earlier, would we be further along today? So an answer to a different side of that question is, it doesn't always have to be perfect, and you can miss opportunities in a different way if you are focusing on being so perfect all the time.
Yeah, so one of the best things I think you can do is start cultivating relationships with people who could be introducing, or people that could actually be giving capital to a company as early as you can. And the first time you meet a venture capitalist, you're not just going, nice to meet you, my name is Ryan, can you give me some money? Like that's not going to work. But you start with those relationships, start talking about what you're working on, ask them for introductions to people that might be interested in those things. At the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier tonight, like they're going to find a million different reasons to tell you no, you need 100,000 monthly recurring revenue, you need 1 million users. They're going to tell you all these different things. They're always going to find a way to say no. But what's important is having the relationships that you can go back and hearing no a second time, and a third time, and a fourth time, until you hit the milestones that they're asking for, and that no becomes a yes, right? These venture capitalists, they don't want you to just fail and disappear. They want you to prove to them that you're building a business that's going to make them a crap load of money. That's what their business is, right? So for us, it's about cultivating relationships as early as possible and then scaling that relationship as our business scales. So right now we have milestones that we're trying to hit that we believe these venture capitalists are going to want to hear and that they're going to get excited about. But at the end of the day, maybe 98% of them are not going to like those milestones, and they're going to ask for new milestones. And that's a great opportunity for us to hit those milestones. Yeah,
with us, we haven't had to. We've had people coming up to us and saying we want to invest, but we've so far said no because there's no need for it, and that's a luxury for us, But the business model that we run, somewhere down the road, if we get into other projects that's going to require millions, then yeah, we're going to be open to looking at that as a possible. One of the possible avenues, but we do not see in our capital financing anyone's dream. You know, because I think that's a very dangerous thing to do, is to just rely in terms of your capital from one stream. That's, you know, like the old saying, don't put your eggs all in one basket. And that is true when it comes down to business, be it, you know, profit or nonprofit or, you know, social entrepreneurs and what for, and so forth.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so first of all, thank you all for the great presentations. And I know that as an entrepreneur, we all have you know, difficult situations, and sometimes things can really seem hopeless. And my question is that, have you ever had a moment where you just want to give up, and or you almost gave up, and what made you, you know, ride through it and continue doing what you do today?
I'll answer that very quickly first. The major hurdle that we had was MLS. You know, the bylaw people coming to us and saying, what are you doing? You can't do this. You know, that was a major thing. And the way how we got over that was simple. We just moved politically, and our counselor, Adam Vaughan, back then, helped us to figure out a way to make it work. So I think it's all the rules and regulations. And I'm not saying to break them, okay? That's not the answer. But the answer is get an exemption.
Yeah, I think it's part of the territory. Like, I'm not going to be this guy up here who's like, nah, I never think about that. There are times where it crosses my mind, like, man, this is really difficult. Like, we're having a really hard go certain times. And then the thought is, like, what else am I going to do? Like, I'm not a startup guy. I don't have a million ideas. I have one, and if this doesn't work, I'll be joining his company, right? So, like, I need to figure out how to make this thing work because for me, it's my life's work. And I need to make it work because I have nothing else.
Yeah, like I said, it really comes back to passion. Sometimes you have to reach to the bottom of the barrel and look at why you started it in the beginning. And it not only, like, I do think of, you know, what will my life be without Link to Feed? I don't think I'd be happy. I can't imagine doing anything else. But I also think, what would the world be without Link to Feed? And I think that the world with Link to Feed is a better place, and that's what keeps me going.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This is for tall people, sorry. Okay. So I have a kind of a personal question. I'm going to give you a tiny background on my business, tiny, so that you kind of get where I'm coming from. My business is culinary education through nutrition. So I teach cooking classes to kids with nutritional games and a nutritional background so that they have a practical means to use that information. I don't call myself a social entrepreneur, because I didn't think I could, because I'm not for profit, because I'm one person. Mm-hmm. If I'm not making any money in my business, I am unemployed. So then what am I doing? But I have 1,000 questions, but my number one question is, can you call yourself a social whatever if you are for profit, and how do you do so, and how do you approach that? Kinda?
Yeah, it's a great question. My personal opinion is it's just don't worry about it. Like, don't worry about what to call yourself, right? Yeah. Like, I have a problem with people who are out there saying, you know what, I'm a social entrepreneur because I'm changing the world. Like, how do you really know you're changing the world? And even for people that set out to be an entrepreneur, like, I still don't know what an entrepreneur is, right? Or how you can start to, when is that day where you wake up one morning and you're like, whoo, today is the day I'm becoming an entrepreneur. Right? In my opinion, you were an entrepreneur the very first time you cried as a baby because you wanted milk or because you crapped in your diaper. Right? You used your resources to attain a goal and you accomplished it, right? And so you don't need to own a business to be an entrepreneur. And you don't have to have a certain permission slip to call you a social entrepreneur, right? If you feel what you're doing is bringing some value to the world and it's bringing some social value, then feel free. Like, you don't need me to tell you that. Like, if that's what you want to do, then call yourself that. But I think that the second we start trying to figure out what we're going to call ourselves in this ecosystem, some stuff starts getting lost. And I think that if you have time to worry about that stuff, that's a problem. Like, you need to spend your time, like, not even thinking about that stuff because it sounds like you're working on an incredible company with an incredible mission, right? So spend your time on that. Let other people call you an entrepreneur, a change maker, a social entrepreneur. Let them worry about that. Worry about your business. You'll do fine.
Ryan is bang on.
Yeah, go nuts. You can call yourself a social entrepreneur. We gave you permission if you needed it.
And just further on that note, like I work with B Corps and fair trade companies that are literally 1 or 2 people. Like you can be a B Corp or a fair trade or a whatever certified social entrepreneur and be a one-person, like a solely owned business. So
I don't doubt that one day it'll be more than just you. It sounds like an awesome venture. Good work.
Thanks.
sweet, we actually have, oh, well, anyway.
5 seconds.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, because I've been asking these folks questions all night, and I wanted to know if you had any questions for one another, because I thought that would be a cool thing to do. So,
I have one. So we talked a few times about like kind of finding that passion when the days are rough. Do either of you have a really good story or, I mean, I think Ryan, you kind of pointed yours out, but like one person that sticks out in your mind or one moment that you go back to when you have those days?
In terms of, the business we're running
Yeah, the
now?
impact of what you're doing.
Well, okay, let me say that what motivated us to say this is going to work is when we had 2 young people, 19 years old, finish school and decided, I'm not going to go on to university because look at my cousin. He's got a graduate degree and is unemployed and is doing whatever, okay? So, they just sort of gave up. They didn't drop out of high school. They finished high school. So what they did was they came to us and said, we've got an idea. And the idea that we have is that we want to open a bicycle repair shop. And the reason for that is, along Dundas, if you look at it in the morning, it's like in Vietnam, the amount of bicycles going down the street, right? And they were smart. They spotted a niche, okay, in terms of their price point of what they could do. So what we did was we hooked them up with BizStart. It's a program the provincial government runs, which provided them with training and some money while they're doing this program. Then at the end, they got $3,000. With $3,000, they were able to establish their bicycle repair business. And that business now is going on to its 4th year, seasonal, okay? Because in the wintertime, they actually shut down and some of them go cycling down south or whatever. And that demonstrates, really, their price point is very smart because the brick and mortar ones, like Sweet Pete or whoever, to do a tune-up is going to cost you $90. They're going to do it for like $50, $60. And so after that experience of seeing 2 young people actually making a living, okay? Actually making a living and being able to pay their rent and buy their food. I mean, they're not millionaires by any means. They've got aspirations of wanting to set up another one now, elsewhere, in the city, in a container, if they could get one for $11 a day. But it's evidence of individuals that have blossomed. I think that has encouraged us to say we're on the right path, and it's a win-win. I think that's the leaving message I'll give to everybody is this. You've got to construct a scenario that is not just a win for yourself, because if it is, it's not going to last very, very long. You've got to construct a scenario that's a win-win for anybody that's involved in your business, be it your customers, your suppliers, or affiliates, or whatever.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for participating, and let's give a hand to this awesome panel.